Hello, getting started. Welcome to day 5 of Shadow School today. I am your host, Brianna Elise Miller, and today we are diving into the 5th gene key with the shadow of impatience, the gift of patience, and the city of timelessness. And this one just has so much unfolding. I have contemplated this one deeply in the past, and today I was just doing my little refresher, getting prepared for our conversation. I'm really excited about what this gene key has to offer us and what the shadow has to offer us in terms of contemplating and inquiring about where we are being impatient and how this impatience is keeping us from living just this amazing, incredible life where we're aligned with the greater flow of the universe. So let's dive in. Well, I want to talk about how patience overall, if you remember back from Shadow School Day 1, I did a little intro about the gene keys, and the gene keys has an approach. So it's a wisdom system. It can be worked with in a variety of ways that are really fun and creative. But at its foundation, it requires a different approach to work with the system of content than how I think a lot of our society approaches working with concepts and trying to learn skills and things like that, which is that it's got 4 parts. 1, gentleness. So always rooted in softness and contemplation. How can we soften into these ideas and not have judgment and be sweet and gentle and loving to ourselves? 2, contemplation. So how do we actually create space and pauses and inner breakthroughs through mental, emotional, and physical contemplation of these concepts in our lives so that we can ultimately embody them in ourselves? Inquiry, which is, again, not about seeking the answers and having the answers and knowing everything and memorizing all of the words and every single one of these gene keys. I've been working with these for years now, and I still have to write down the words for each of the keynotes, for each of the gifts, shadows, and cities. It's a lot to hold and to grasp onto, and recognizing that I don't need to hold that in order to embody and to work with these concepts. That's an example of this inquiry, like asking the questions, being curious, having a state of curiosity, knowing that no question is off limits, and also there's no pressure to have an answer, right? To seek a solution. And then finally, patience is the other aspect of the Gene Keys approach. And so we're going to explore patience in a little bit more detail here, and that is helpful for contemplating all of the Gene Keys. So let's dive into the shadow of impatience, because that's what we're here for in Shadow School, is to really dig in to the fears and to the parts of ourselves that we haven't been maybe consciously aware of up until now. And we can begin through inquiry and patience and gentleness and contemplation to start to pull those areas of ourselves, those ways of being, the beliefs that we have in the world, into a state of consciousness, which is where we can actually work with them. When things are unconscious or they're living in our subconscious mind, we don't have the ability to consciously work with them and play with them and experiment and change and adapt and integrate and grow. They're just kind of running the show, and we don't even know that we're out of control. So in the shadow of impatience, on a collective level, pause for a moment here with me and just consider impatience and how this shadow of impatience just fully permeates and underlies our whole world, our whole collective world right now. We have the need to earn money, to have a living, and to survive, which really is a driving force behind impatience and the need to get more done faster, to be busy, to be productive, to make things happen as a means of success. We also have instant gratification for almost everything these days. I was just reflecting on this, like, remember dial-up internet? Remember when there was no internet? I do, and I remember having to, like, get out an actual physical map or ask someone for directions and then get lost, and then who knows how long it's gonna take you to actually find where you're supposed to be going. And then we went to having dial-up internet where it took, like, 5 minutes to actually get online. We had to wait, and then the connection was really slow, and now you're just instantly on every single device on your wrist, on wherever you are, you can access information to anything almost. You don't have to go to the library and sit there for hours and pore over books like we used to. You can just Google search and then the thing that you want pops up. Or you used to have to go to stores or and now you can have things delivered to your house. We have instant gratification on everything. So our attention spans have shrunken and we have zero tolerance or patience for having to wait for things and for having to have things come through in their own natural timeline, which we'll get to in a bit. And impatience itself is really a human construct. The rest of the universe, the earth, the animals, the plants, they're not impatient. They're not struggling with the shadow of impatience. I if you're a tea drinker and you get one of those teas that has little bits of wisdom on it, I'm sure that you've seen the one that says something like, "Nature's never in a hurry, and yet everything gets done." Like, that's what I'm talking about here. My dogs are not well, they might get impatient to go outside if they have to potty. They might remind me multiple times, but that's just because they need to go in a natural rhythm. But they're not sitting around like, "Man, why hasn't this guy called me back?" Or "I'm gonna be late for my appointment. I have to rush." Or, like, "Why haven't I been able to be successful in my career yet?" They're not having these impatient, pushing, controlling, dominating thoughts around how their life should be, how things should be. Ultimately, that's what we get to at the root of impatience is that we have this perception that things are not how we would like them to be or how they should be. And as a result, we want things to hurry up and change so they can be how we want them to be. But the thing is, the universe is not on our timeline. And what happens as a result of not getting things the way that we want them to be or how we think they should be is that we have this really deep distrust in life. Like if there's something that we want, we have to go make it happen in our timing. And we are so disconnected from the underlying natural rhythms of the universe and of life. A great example of this is that right now I'm in the season of winter here in Illinois, and winter is when we kind of like hunker down and sit by the fire and the plants are dormant and there's less animal activity, the squirrels have built up fat restores so they don't have to like go out and hunt for food as much as they did in the springtime, and it's just a feeling of slowing down. And there's this like needing to be in a womb-like space where we can restore and recalibrate before we emerge again in spring. And yet, if you look at the business world, everyone's still driving, 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 getting things done, pushing, going, running. So we're totally out of the natural rhythms of life that's around us. And this is because we have this as humans, we feel we're separate from everything. And so we have a huge fear that there is no underlying order. Yesterday, or like a couple days ago, we talked about intolerance. We talked about chaos as one of the shadows in the gene keys. this fear is here again, and impatience, which is we don't think that there's actually an order to things. And that's terrifying if things really are just chaos. And so we try to exert our own force, our own timelines onto the world and ourselves and our lives. The other giant fear that humans have that really drives this fear and shadow rooted in impatience is, of course, that our time is running out, that we don't have enough time, whatever that means, because we all will die in this life. And when we are stuck in a perception that this one single human life is all that we've got, you can understand that that would drive a lot of action, pushing, forcing, trying to get things done, trying to make things happen because our time is running out. So there's some pretty big motives behind that underlie this shadow of impatience that are really just fundamental to our human operating system as it has developed over the millennia. We have this neocortex that perceives time in a linear fashion, past, present, and future. And that really has us see impatience and wanting to change things and wanting to change things before we die, wanting things to be how we want them to be. And this creates so much dis-ease for ourselves, so much pressure we're putting on ourselves to be busy and productive, so much dis-ease in the planet. I know that when I really began to do my work around detaching and decoupling my self-worth from being productive, from producing and creating at work, and from working itself, from proving my worth through working, I had a lot of mental patterns and beliefs that would still be running in the background for quite some time around, but am I doing enough? Am I doing it fast enough? Even things like this, where I have known for a long time that I want to come on and share all of the things that I'm learning in my own personal studies and work. But for some reason, I've procrastinated, or I haven't done it, or I haven't felt like I could be seen or come on and speak to all of you. I've had these moments at the end of the year reflecting back and thinking, I've gone another year. I've gone another year and I haven't done the thing that I wanted to do. I haven't launched a podcast. I haven't done it. Imagine if I would have launched the podcast 3 years ago and I said I wanted to do it. Well, like, nobody cares. There is no there. There's no need to like look at ourselves and the things that we produce in that way. That's impatience coming through. That's like me feeling like I had to force the timeline of what's happening in life instead of recognizing, oh, now is the natural time where I have a culmination of the things I've been learning. And I feel really embodied and confident in showing up and sharing my voice. Now is the natural time for me to do that, as opposed to putting all this judgment and criticism on myself for not doing it before. So that's an example of impatient shadow coming to life. And what is really underneath all of this is a huge distrust, a huge lack of trust in the order of life and in the natural rhythms of life. And if you're someone like me that has struggled with control as one of your core issues that you work with, a need to control everything, maybe a need for perfectionism, or even a need to like push and force and do things, a need to change others and your circumstances. I think that's describing a lot of us right now. If you have that need, then I want you to really pause and contemplate how you have distrust, how you have a lack of trust. I want to offer a word here, which is surrender. And this is a word that's really thrown around a ton these days. Surrender, 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 release and let go, control, and all of these things. Easier said than done, right? I remember when the word surrender started to come into my world. And this, this happens. Like we have this reticular activating system in our brains, this RAS system, that when we start to perceive something, like let's say you buy a new car, and now you notice everywhere you look, other people are driving the same car. It's because your mind is like aware of this thing now that it wasn't aware of before, and now it sees it everywhere. Now it's like looking for it. It's not that those cars weren't everywhere before. It's just that you weren't aware of it. You weren't noticing that. There's just so much for us to notice in our environment. That's true for words and concepts too. So now I'm planting these concepts of patience and impatience in your brain. You're going to start seeing them, hopefully, and working with them. But I had that happen with the word surrender quite a few years ago. And at this point, I was still really grappling with a lot of needing to control, needing things to be a certain way, pushing and thinking I needed to make things, happen on my own accord and get things done. I've always seen myself as kind of a get things done girl, create something from nothing. There's some good stuff in there if you learn how to actually harness the gifts inside of that instead of the unhealthy expression of that tendency. So when I started to notice this word surrender coming through, I was like, oh no, I don't know that I can work with this word. Because to me at that point, it really felt like you were losing something. If you surrendered, it was like you were at war and you failed. And as a result, you had to give something up, or someone had something over you or had control over you and you were out of control. You lost something, something was taken away from you. You had to basically throw up your white flag and resign, and you were out of control. All of that was how I perceived the word surrender. So you can see underneath of this, there's like such a distrust for anything that is not me forcing forward and how I want things to be. And that's true of what's happening when we have this fear, this shadow of impatience, individually and at the collective level. We have this huge distrust, and we don't feel like it's safe to surrender into the natural flow that exists around us. And so we don't even see that the natural flow is there. We think we have to create it all ourselves. The thing is, if we're attuned to these fears of needing to control, having this deep distrust in life, feeling like we don't have enough time, the fear of death, time is running out, there's no order to anything, then no matter what we do, no matter what we try to do to mentally or emotionally compensate for those fears, our physiological body is still going to carry a really deep sense of unsafety. It's never going to feel safe or relaxed. Our actual cells are never going to feel that state of relaxation. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what else happens then. We've got shallow breathing, we've got nervous system dysregulation. You can see there's a lot that gets pulled through, not just in our perception and the voice in our head talking to us about how much we need to get done by when and how it needs to be exactly that carries impatience, but we have this reinforcing cycle where we're creating this tension in our bodies, this sense of unsafety in our bodies, this pressure. So for me, that is shallow breathing. It also feels like I want to leap out of my seat and I can't sit still. Like I need to run around and get things done. I want to like move forward, like lean forward. These are the things that are happening in my actual body, like a real nervous sense of energy too. That's like this agitation. It's, like a bit frenetic feeling. And you can see my energy and as I'm trying to tap into these feelings in my bodies, these hand gestures and the way I'm speaking changes. I haven't taken a deep breath in a long time. And so if we whip ourselves into this frenzy through impatience, you can see how this changes the nature of our body. And then the body becomes this inhospitable place where it's really hard to get out of this impatience. And so what happens is we can have a couple different expressions. So here we are again with this repressive and reactive states of expression. And in the repressive expression of this shadow of impatience, we get pessimistic. So this is like being resigned. You're like totally disconnected from the rhythm of life. You have a fear that nothing will ever change. Nothing is going to get better no matter what you do. It's kind of this downward spiral in on yourself. Life just creates this crisis, perhaps, that can help you see then as a result that you can break out of it. That's kind of the only way out of this because you're just going down and like doubling in and so negative and pessimistic about how things are. There's not really a way for you in that state to think yourself out of it or to just be positive. Or if you've ever found yourself in this way of being and thinking in the world, and you have somebody that's like, just think positive, or, one of those things you're just like, oh my goodness, I cannot even handle you right now. You are not rooted in the real world. That's an example of this pessimistic expression. And really, the thing that gets people out of that is that some kind of crisis happens. And you're presented with choices where you can either break out or break through of this pessimism, or you can stay in it for another round around the Ferris wheel and merry-go-round until life presents you with another crisis that you can use for your curriculum in life or continue to ignore. Then we look at the reactive expressive state, and this is pushy. This is one that I feel a lot more familiar with personally in my own life and in work, as I've shared with control issues and domination issues and like all these things. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, the type that I have tested on before is the type 8, which is the active controller. So this need to like control and push and force and have things be the way that I think they should be is like really deep in there as an underlying motivation of not wanting anything else to have any power over me. And so you can see why surrender was such a tough cookie for me. In pushy, what happens is we begin to think that we can force the flow of everything around us. So this is really interesting because impatience in our society is almost seen as a positive thing in many ways, like in business, a sense of urgency, the ability to get things done and make things happen and to force outcomes. You can see how this plays out in our work world so clearly. This looks like controlling, pushing others around, and like having them do things. This is the micromanager in a large way. And when we're here, though, we're really aggravated a lot of the time. And we can easily be reactive and kind of snap to release the pressure because, like, every little thing agitates us. We're so aggravated. We don't feel like things are working out how we think they should be. You can see how much attachment to outcomes and how things should be is rooted in this impatience. And what results is that we just double down. We get really stubborn and we force on, we push through, we muddle through. And this is like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill every single day. This is the expression here of that impatience. You stubbornly keep going, and everything feels so hard. Why is everything so hard? If you've ever said that to yourself, boom, you might be sitting here in the pushy state of the impatience shadow. And the Gene Keys offers that how we break out of that particular state is that our resistance and our deep distrust in everything kind of brings us to a turning point. And this could be like burnout at work. So this is definitely like something I've experienced. Is you just keep pushing and going and doing all of the things, even though nothing feels easy, nothing feels like it's working, and you just drive yourself into the ground and you've reached this state of burnout. It's really unhealthy for your actual physical body also, until you get to this crisis moment again, where it's like, oh, geez, here we are. What am I going to do? And at that point, the question to ask yourself is, do I want to begin living again? Just beautiful. Let's talk about the gift of patience. So this particular gene key, we have this interesting dynamic and dance. We have a spectrum. So some gene keys, the gift emerges out of the shadow, and it's a somewhat different concept, and it's an evolution of the shadow. In this case, we have almost this opposite dynamic going, where we have impatience and patience on a spectrum. And so we have a dance in life where we're kind of between, like, where are we on the spectrum at any given time? And patience ultimately is a sense of acceptance. So remember, we talk about impatience. We are not accepting how things are. We want them to be different. We want to change them. We want to make things happen and be our way. Patience is acceptance of how things are. This is circumstances. This is timing. This is other humans. I want you to sit with that one for a while. Take a beat and contemplate that. Where are you being impatient with another person because you are not simply in acceptance with how they show up in any given moment? So, one of the things for us to do here is to notice that patience itself is actually a practice. It's not an end state that we get to. None of these things are end states. They're all practices for us to cultivate, contemplate, and show up as a way of being. And patience is kind of a self-proving gift. That's how the Gene Keys puts it, which I think is really interesting. Like, the more we practice patience, the more patient we are. And then the more we have space to be patient again and again and again and again. So it's like this gift that like really shows you what's possible and builds over time, which I think is beautiful. Now, there are a couple of different ways of looking at patience. I think if we are really rooted in impatience, we think being patient is simply waiting. It's not. Simply waiting is kind of like a surface level of patience, where you're like waiting and you're kind of tapping your foot and you're looking over here and you're looking at your watch and your phone or whatever, and you're annoyed, but you're waiting your turn, you're waiting your turn in line. So you can be impatiently patient. That's not what we're going for here in the gift of patience. Really, the practice itself is noticing when you are being impatient, when you do feel a sense of restlessness, and cultivating space around that. Space and grace, space for grace, whatever you want to call it. And having your being over time through this practice of creating this space and noticing your restlessness and noticing and taking note of your impatient moments and your need for control and things to be how you want them to be, you deepen into a deeper sense of patience. And here, the patience actually becomes this inner spaciousness that you carry with you throughout your days. So you're not having to create patience in the moments. Instead, you have a deep well of inner space that you can work with in the moment. So that's where we want to get to, this sense of beingness. You can see I'm like slowing down a little bit into this concept as we get into this deep patience instead of the surface level waiting patience. And the more time we have to pause, this more inner spaciousness that we have and cultivate, and we have time to kind of like look around and daydream and contemplate as a practice, we naturally have more gratitude because we're actually aware of the amazing gifts that surround us in life. I'm taking this fantastic course that Charles Eisenstein put together called Living in the Gift. And it's really framed around how the universe itself is built on kind of like an operation of gifts. Like it really is a gifting consciousness. And we don't, in this false scarcity and false efficiency collective reality we've created, we really grapple with this idea of gifts and abundance. And so we also lack a lot of gratitude. And this gratitude is a really natural state for us when we actually see life and everything around us as gifts. And so, this deep sense of patience that creates that inner well of space for us allows us to be more in the gratitude. And it also has us show up a lot kinder as a result. In fact, the Gene Keys puts it that patience is the vanguard of love, which I think is so beautiful. Especially when we're working with other people in this way. Patience, if you can think about it this way, is the field in which, it's the space in which we can be loving. I'm getting emotional. I'm just feeling this well up. Instead of going on to the next thing and on to the next thing and on to the next thing, we have this space in which we can choose our response to life and our response to other people. We can hold space for ourselves and hold space for others. And this is where we really get into the ability to return non-love with love. It's just beautiful. We can accept people as they are. We can be in a state of love. We can be love when we have deep patience. Then we get to the city of timelessness. So remember, every gene key has a shadow conscious frequency state, a gift state, which is emerging out of this shadow. It's the glittering diamond that exists in the shadow that we surface and we bring out into the world and we be. And then we have the divine gift, the city. In this case, it's timelessness. So here is when we transcend any concept of past, present, future, any concept of linear time. All of that dissolves away. There is nothing being born. There is nothing dying. Everything just is. And this is where we receive and achieve a state of beingness, of true beingness in unity with everything that is. So you can imagine here, this is fully in trust of everything in the universe, the rhythms of the universe, and letting everything unfold exactly how it will in life. And I want to leave you with just one other concept, and then I have a little incantation to end us with today, which Richard Rudd shared in his contemplation of this fifth gene key. It's called the Holy Incantation of Solace, and we'll get to that in a second. But the final concept I want to leave you with is that we can only create in the present moment. The present moment's actually all that we have. This being present in the present moment is all that we have. Certainly, we carry the past into the present and it shapes the present for us. If we're aware of that and we work with that, we can create space between how the past must shape us and how we choose to be in the present moment. And certainly, the future is present with us in the present moment also. And what's beautiful about that is that if we're not impatient and worrying about how that future will be in the present moment, and therefore squandering our present moment, our juicy present moment, which is where we can create and respond to life. If instead we can hold a vision for the future in the present moment that is beautiful and in rhythm and flow with all that is, then we literally create it and shape it in the present moment. Impatience, patience, timelessness. That's what we're working with today. I am going to leave you with this incantation. So I invite you, if you aren't already listening to me as you're falling asleep, to close your eyes and to settle into your seat. If you're driving, please don't do this. But if you're listening to me and you're sitting down or lying down, allow yourself to be grounded in the present moment. Allow your breath to deepen here. Deep belly breaths and feeling a sense of grounding connection into the earth itself. Notice if you're leaning backward or if you're leaning forward in any way. Try to find that core stability, that sense of alignment that anchors you into the present moment of now. And allow any need for hurrying to simply fade away. Allow any tension in your body to melt away. And I'll share this holy incantation of solace. Solace is comfort, relief, a soothing, a reassuring. And holy really is rooted in a concept of wholeness. That's really what holy means, being whole. And here we go. I would love for you, if you are a visual person that does visualization, imagine and visualize this, feel it in your body, see these concepts come to life in your body itself as I'm reading to you. Let love flow through my soul. Let light flower in my heart. Let warmth radiate in my belly. Let purity shimmer in my bones. Let kindness resound in my voice. Let clarity shine through my mind. Let solace abound in my life, touching all who I meet. Let solace abound in the world, bringing all beings into perfect union. My wish for you is that this allows you to recenter into the present moment today, or whenever you're listening to this, such that you can cultivate a deeper sense of patience and inner spaciousness. If you are interested in working in a deeper way with these concepts, I'm creating a program called Beautiful Boundaries, where we actually have very new energetics on how to create boundaries that foster and cultivate deeper connection and intimacy with others instead of building walls and separation, and how to work with boundaries in a way that actually invites and enrolls other people in your life into helping you do your own inner work instead of co-opting them into changing so that you can remain comfortable in your bubble. And this is really all about how do we work with our triggers so that we turn them into treasures, just like we're working with shadows here and bringing them into gifts, into the light. Beautiful Boundaries is really going to focus on that as well. Triggers into treasures. How can we get into the fear that resides in the conflicts that have us create walls and boundaries with others, and see what curriculum lies inside of these fears for ourself and our human being in this lifetime. So if you're interested in joining me for that program, it's going to be a 6-week group program. I don't have a launch date yet, so I just have a wait list because I'm trying to see if I can get some interest in this program so that we can decide what the start date will be together and decide what time and day of the week we'll host our live sessions together based on who's really joining me for this program. So there's some flexibility in there. We're going to naturally infuse energetics from a selection of my favorite gene keys to work with. The 3 we actually are working with yesterday, today, and tomorrow are definitely present as we explore chaos, impatience, intolerance. We're going to work a lot with peace, which is the 6th gene key, which we're going to dive into tomorrow, which is actually in my hologenetic profile. So it's the other thing I'll mention before I hop off today, which is that if you're interested in working with these gene keys in a deeper way, I highly recommend that you go to genekeys.com and you put in your birthday time information to pull a hologenetic profile, which is what it's called. That is your unique gene keys profile based on your astrological planet's positioning during your time of birth and how that corresponds to these 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, which is what the 64 gene keys are rooted in. You have a unique picture of those different hexagrams coming to life corresponding with the planets. That's what creates your hologenetic profile. If you're interested in that, I would highly recommend you go get that. What that will do for you is that it will chart a path for you to activate your genius and the unique gifts that you bring to the world. That's the activation sequence. It will highlight four specific gene keys for you there to contemplate and work with. Some of these might show up for you in your activation sequence. It goes into your Venus sequence, which is then an unfolding of your emotional world, the core wounds that you have, the coping mechanisms that you've created, everything related to love, intimacy, and your connections with other humans. So this is all about relationships. And I believe I don't know the number. There's several gene keys in that one, maybe like 7 or something. There's a lot in that particular sequence. And finally, it ends in your Pearl sequence, which is really about how you achieve prosperity and abundance in this lifetime. And it gives you a series of gene keys to contemplate there that are unique to how you can achieve prosperity and be prosperity in the world. So if you're interested in that and deepening and seeing which of these gene keys is like in your profile and how can that be worked with in your life, go get your free profile at genekeys.com. And if you're interested in joining me for Beautiful Boundaries when that launches, I've got on LinkedIn the link up here. I'll add it to the comments on Instagram. It's also in my bio. You can get on the wait list. Muse and Method is my website. museandmethod.com/boundaries is how you can get on the wait list to be notified when that program is available to join. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tomorrow, I'm really excited to get into the shadow of conflict. The shadow of conflict. Then we get into diplomacy is the gift and the city of peace. And why I'm really excited about it is because it is in my purpose sphere in my Gene Keys profile, which means it is what I'm supposed to be in the world, peace, and what I'm supposed to bring into every single relationship that I have. And so I will be being peace with you all tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you then.